In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to create glass windows. I will show you 4 methods for creating glass. These are going to be fully breakable, partially breakable, and non-breakable glass. The first 3 are going to be BSP Brush based, and the 4th one we will use props. Here I have window frames where we will position our glass into. The first one is going to be fully breakable glass. So let's go ahead, come over here. So for this we need to create a BSP brush, and you can either use the block tool to create a new BSP brush, or you can duplicate already existing BSP brush. So let's go to top view. Let's lower our grid. I'm hitting the bracket keys to decrease or increase our grid, and we want to lower our grid down to 2. With the brush selected, going to hold down Shift, left click, hold and drag to duplicate this brush and extend it to fit the window frame. And very important for this glass BSP brush to be between 2 and 4 units thick. So for this we're going to set it to 4. Let's check this in perspective view, and I'm going to change the view to 3D shaded textured polygons so we can see this a little bit better. Let's go ahead and fly around, and our glass window is positioned into the window frame nicely. Our next step is we need to assign a no draw texture to every face of this brush. So let's go to face edit sheet. Let's go to browse and filter for no draw. Double click to set it, and now hold Shift and right click on any surface of this brush, and the no draw texture will be applied to every face of that brush. Now we need to find a glass texture we want to use for our glass window. With the face edit sheet still open, click on browse and filter for glass. Scroll through and find the glass you would want to use for your glass window. There's quite a few glass windows you can use, but not all glass textures are created the same, and I will show you what that means later. But for right now, we're going to choose Glass Urban 03, double click to set it, and right click on the front or the back face of the brush to apply the glass texture. We only want to do this for one of the faces. So essentially we'll have a glass texture on one BSP surface, and the rest of the surfaces will contain no draw texture. And this is the proper way to create glass that's going to be breakable. Now left click on the texture of the glass and choose Fit to align the texture. Now close the face edit sheet, switch over to Select tool, select the BSP glass and press Ctrl T to tie to entity. You can also click on to entity right here on the right hand side. In the drop down menu we want to switch this to Surface Breakable and click apply. Now we can close this and let's test this in game.
Let's go.
Now, as I've mentioned, not all glass textures are created equal. So if you try to use a different glass texture, you may find that it doesn't appear on both sides of the glass window. So let's go ahead and apply a different texture. We're going to use Glass Hotel 001. Apply it. Let's compile and test in game. And just to note that we still have everything set to no draw except for the front face of the glass. So inside the game we can see the glass from one side, and when we go to the other side it's invisible. And this has to do with the material properties for that texture. So the proper and the recommended way to create glass windows is to have no draw texture everywhere except for one of the front or the back faces of the brush. But in special situations like this, if you want to use a texture that's not set up to be viewable from both sides, you can go ahead and apply to the front and to the back face of the brush. So we have glass texture on the front, glass texture on the back, and no draw on everywhere else. Let's go ahead, test in game and see what it looks like. Here's the front, and here's the back. So again, this is not the recommended way, and if you experience any issues, then choose a different texture that works for the correct and the proper way to set up glass windows. But as a workaround, and in this case I've applied it to both sides and it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly undo to get back to our proper way setup for our glass window. Now let's go ahead and set up partially breakable glass window. So instead of shooting the window and have it be fully breakable, with partially breakable window you'll be able to shoot certain areas of the glass and it will break only where you shoot, similar to CS Office map. Let's go ahead and set this up right in here. Instead of duplicating the brush, let's go ahead and start from scratch. I'm going to use the block tool, click on browse, and we want no draw texture. This will ensure that when we create a brush, every face will have no draw texture on it. Let's go to top view, zoom in, and let's create this particular glass window 2 units thick. And again, as long as you keep this between 2 and 4 units, you're good. Now let's go to front view, resize the brush. Let's check in the perspective viewport and click enter. Let's fly around, take a look. Everything looks good. Now let's open face edit sheet, go to browse and type in glass. And in order to make glass partially breakable, you have to use one specific texture that's available to you right now. No other texture will work. And in our case, this texture is called glass, PRODWANDWA. If you try to use any other glass texture, it will not work. And I will show you what happens when you do. But let's choose the correct one, the one that will work. Double click to set it, and then right click on the front or the back face of the glass window to apply it. Let's go ahead, left click to select it, and choose fit. Let's close face edit sheet. Select the glass window, press Ctrl T to tie to entity, and choose function, breakable surface. I'm going to start typing in breakable and choose the second one down in the list. Select it and then choose apply. We're going to keep everything as default. Let's close it. So we essentially used the same exact steps as before, except we set our glass window thickness to 2 units and we chose function breakable surface. Let's go ahead, compile and test in game. Let's go ahead and take a look around front and back so we can see our glass texture, and we can see it from both sides. And now if we shoot, we have a partially breakable glass. So right now by default, this is the only texture that works as a function breakable surface. And if you attempt to use any other glass texture, it will not work. So let me duplicate this set and show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to go quickly look for a different glass texture. Let's just use the one that we used before. Urban Glass 03. Apply it to one single face. Make sure that this is still set to function breakable surface, and it is. Let's go ahead, compile and test. So here we are inside the game. And when I shoot it, it does not work. So this particular texture is the only one you can use right now for function breakable surface. And for our third BSP Brush based glass window, we're going to create a non-breakable glass window. So I'm going to duplicate this BSP brush and position it right inside here. I'm going to define it as 2 units thick. Let's go ahead and texture this with no draw texture. So with the face edit sheet open, I'm going to left click on no draw texture already in the map to set it. Then hold shift and right click. This will apply that texture to every single face of the brush. Now let's go to Browse, Filter for Glass, and find the glass texture you want to use. Now, just as before, not all glass textures are created equal, and I'll show you the difference depending on which texture you use. But for this example, at first, I'm going to apply this glass 01. Double click to set it, and right click to apply it. Left click to select the face of that texture, and let's go ahead and click Fit to align. Now let's compile and test. Here is our non-breakable window. If we go ahead and shoot, it will act like glass would, but it just will not break because this is just a simple BSP brush. Now there is a problem with applying certain glass material without setting it to an entity such as function breakable or function breakable surface, and that is we cannot see it from the other side. So in this case, we would need to apply the same material from the front to the back face. And now if we go ahead and compile, our non-breakable BSP brush based window will work. Now to show you the difference between different glass texture materials being used, I'm going to use the first glass texture that we applied for function breakable. I'm going to assign it to the front face of the brush for our non-breakable glass, which is again just a BSP brush. And for the back, I'm going to make sure that I have no draw texture set to it. Let's go ahead, compile and test. So here we are. As you can see, it works. You can see our glass. We can't see it on the other side. And if we come over here in the front and shoot it, it does not act like real glass. We don't have the decals like we did before. And this is set to the material property of this texture. So in this case, for this particular texture, it works best when you set it to function breakable. So if we take this BSP brush and we turn it to function breakable, then compile and test, we'll be able to see it from both sides. And when you shoot it, the incorrect decals won't matter because the glass breaks. So this goes to show you that depending on the texture of glass that you're using and whether your surface is a regular BSP brush or an entity such as function breakable or function breakable surface, it matters. So always test any glass texture that you're using, whether it's going to be assigned to a function breakable or function breakable surface or just a regular BSP brush textured. Always test those textures by jumping inside the game and shooting at it to see how it reacts. Now let's go ahead and turn this entity back to our regular BSP brush. So I'm going to select it and hit to world. This will now become a BSP brush and not an entity. Now the reason I'm mentioning non-breakable windows is because there are certain parts of your map where you may want to have windows that don't break on force, such as the exterior boundaries of the map or certain locations within the map where you want a surface to function like glass but not break. An example of this would be on the map CS Back Alley, where you have glass windows that function like glass but do not break, and most of these include exterior boundaries of the map. So let's go ahead and replace this glass texture with something else that will behave like glass. We'll assign this to only the front face of the brush, and the back face is going to remain as no draw, as if we are creating a room that a player will not be able to enter, but we want to have a glass surface to block the player. Now I'm going to duplicate the setup for the walls and the window and replace the window texture with another glass texture to something which would be perfect for, let's say, a building with non-breakable glass windows, similar to what you just saw in CS Back Alley. And for our final way to create glass windows is to use a prop static or prop physics. Switch to Entity Tool. Under Categories, we want to change Objects to Prop and either use prop static or prop physics. Prop static will be a static prop that you won't be able to break. A prop physics is a prop that you can interact with and break. So let's go ahead and choose prop static first. I'm going to place it right here. Now let's go ahead and double click, go to world model, browse, and filter by window. And scroll through and find the window that you would want to use. Let's go ahead and use this window industrial. Double click to set it, click apply. And let's go ahead and align it to our BSP brush. I'm also going to duplicate it off to the side and switch this to a prop physics. So we're going to take this prop static, duplicate it. This BSP brush on the bottom is just so the windows are not floating. Now we're going to go ahead and double click, change class from prop static to prop physics. Click apply. And it's very important that when you set your world model to the window that you want to use, make sure when you select that prop to click over to info and check if that prop can be used as static and as physics, because not all props you'll be able to use one or the other. So some props will not show up, and that's due to using that prop as incorrect prop type. So when you're using a prop physics or a prop static, make sure that the prop you're choosing can work as a prop static or as a prop physics. Let's go ahead and close. Now we have a prop static and a prop physics. And last, for prop physics, you want to go into properties, click over to flags, and click on start asleep. Otherwise, this prop static is going to move inside the level when you launch your map. So this ensures that this prop static will be stationary until players' interaction with it. Now let's go ahead and compile and test. Now for any glass windows or other reflective surfaces that you have inside your map, you need to insert at least one environment cube map. This will properly calculate your reflections within your level. Ideally, you want to space these out and place them next to your glass windows in order to reflect the surrounding environment better. But to start things off, you want to include at least one within your map. To do this, you want to switch over to Entity Tool. Under Objects, go ahead and look for Environment Cube Map. You can start typing in Cube. Select it, and left click inside the Perspective Viewport to place the Environment Cube Map. I'm going to go ahead and delete this since we already have one. So let's go ahead and do a summary. There are 4 different ways to create glass windows. The first 3 are BSP Brush based. The first one is fully breakable glass window. You want to create a BSP brush anywhere between 2 and 4 units thick. You want to texture the entire brush with no draw texture and apply a gloss texture to one of the brush faces, to the front or to the back. This is the proper and the recommended way to create glass surfaces. Then you want to select that BSP brush and press Ctrl T to tie to entity. Then you want to choose function breakable. Now, since not all glass textures are created equal, some of these glass materials will not show up on both sides due to that glass material property. In that case, you may need to apply it to both sides of the BSP brush. Just know that this is not the recommended way, and if you experience any issues, then you may want to find a glass texture that works correctly. The second one is partially breakable glass. Create a BSP brush 2 to 4 units thick and apply no draw texture on the entire brush. Select the brush, press Ctrl T to tie to entity, and choose Function Breakable Surface. You then want to apply one single texture that works for Function Breakable Surface, and that is PROD WAND WA. This is the only texture that works. Apply it to a single face of the brush, and now you will have partially breakable glass. Third one is non-breakable glass. Create a BSP brush 2 to 4 units thick. Apply no draw texture to every face of the brush. Then either texture one side of the brush or both sides, depending if the player is going to be able to see it from both sides. Usually these non-breakable glass windows are used for exterior boundaries of the map, so most of the time you'll only need to texture one brush face and leave everything else as no draw. And that would be it for non-breakable glass window. And for our fourth and final way is to use a prop static or prop physics. Use the entity tool and insert a prop static or prop physics. Prop static is a non-movable object, and a prop physics is a movable and often breakable object. Then go to Object Properties, World Model, and filter for Windows. As you're looking through props, click over to Info to make sure that that prop can be used as a prop static or as a prop physics. And then once you find the glass window you like, double-click to set it, apply, and close the window. If you are using a prop physics, make sure to go in Object Properties, click over to Flags, and click on Start Asleep, so this prop doesn't move when you launch the map. So now you have 4 different ways you can insert a glass window and use it inside your map.